This conference will now be recorded.
Great. So guys, welcome back again. So we were discussing about the Azure storage accounts yesterday. So we went ahead, created the storage accounts, and we played around with the access tiers. We moved it from hot to cool and cool to archive, and we understood what happens when you go to archive. I said it'll take some time to rehydrate the blob. And I also said that it'll take somewhere around 24 to 48 hours depending upon the priority that you have. And we have discussed about let's say how you can access your blobs using something called as a Azure storage Microsoft Storage Explorer. So I also asked you all to go ahead and download it. So guys, did you all go ahead, create a storage account, put your data into it, and play around with the access keys and the connection strings as well? Like, any challenges there?
Hi Kiran, I have one issue.
Hmm.
So I I created a storage account. After that, I created a container.
Okay.
I put some files on it.
Hmm.
So whenever I change a container to anonymous access,
Hmm.
after some time it's automatically changing to the private. So I'm unable to access those files from other browser.
Let me check that, because normally when you put something into, let's say, a different access tier, it stays in there until and unless you go ahead and change it explicitly. Okay, let me take that. Let me park that aside, and let me look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. All right. So yesterday we were looking at these things, right? So we said, okay, fine, what are the replications, and we did look at what replic. I mean, we did basically create our storage account only in one kind of a replication called LRS, and we put data into it, and let's say we were able to access the data as such. Now the thing is, can I change my replication after the creation of a storage account? Yes. Then how can change it? So let's see how it is. So I have a storage account called the developer Raji, and I have a storage account, let's say storage 2ZZ, something like this. And my storage account is sitting in LRS, and it's sitting in a region called East US. Now let's say you have a requirement right now, or let's say you have a condition right now that, what, can you please go ahead and change it to, let's say, a different replication tier, because you need data protection, right? Anyone needs a data protection. So if I say go to something called as configuration. Now configuration is that setting tab of your storage account. And here I said, what, you cannot change your account kind, neither you can change the performance tier. You cannot go from standard to premium and premium to standard back again. But can you go from, let's say, a lower SKU? So this is called an SKU. When I say SKU or replication, it actually means the same. So can I go from, let's say, LRS to, let's say, GRS or RAGRS? So let me do a GRS. Now I said, okay, fine, it's geo redundancy storage, and let me do a save out here. And it'll take like about 2 or 3 seconds in order to go ahead and change the setting. And it says, what, it'll take like about 30 seconds for the setting to be affected. And if you look at the overview right now, it'll say, okay, fine, what, your storage account right now is in a replication tier called geo redundancy storage. Your primary location is East US and your secondary location is West US. Meaning, now I am asynchronously copying your data from a location in East US to a location that is sitting hundreds and hundreds of miles away from East US. That is in West US. And it's also saying that, what, your storage account, the disk is ready, meaning the data is ready. I am also making sure that I'm backing up your data, and whatever you save in going forward, like, from today, whatever you save going forward, I'll go ahead and also store it not only in the primary.
Rima. Ah.
Guys, can you please go on mute? Someone is on unmute. Okay, so it's not only available in the primary, but it's also available, let's say, in the secondary location as well. So you see that both the endpoints are right now available. But can I access my data from a secondary endpoint? Now I'm using a technical term called an endpoint. Now if I come down, there is something called as geo replication. Now I click on it. It says, you know what? Yes, there is two, endpoints out here. One being East US and the other being West US. Both are available. So I'll say, okay, fine. Since both are available, let me go ahead and test the same thing. So I have some kind of a data out here. So like we did yesterday, let me first change my access tier to blob so that I can go ahead and, let's say, access my data. So I basically say view and I say, oh, you go here and take my URL and let me go ahead and hit my URL out here. And it is available, which is great. Meaning I am accessing it right now, guys, from the primary endpoint. Meaning I am accessing it from East US, which is my primary location out there. And I'm able to get my data. Now, the question that I am asking Microsoft is that, hey, Microsoft, do you know what? Can I also go ahead and access my data from the secondary endpoint? Because it is very important for me, right? Because let's say if my primary endpoint is down, or if the primary region is down, can I even go ahead and access my data, let's say from a secondary region? Then Microsoft says, you know what? I'm sorry, you will not be able to access it. Then I say, you know what? Why? Because Microsoft says this is not a read access endpoint. None of the above, neither an LRS, nor a ZRS, nor a GRS will offer you a read access on a different endpoint. Meaning, let's say, okay, fine. If it's in primary, I mean, sorry, if it is an LRS, it's like the least tier that you have. Like you have like three different copies of your data sitting within the same data center. So I can understand it's just one storage account that is like replicated in three different things. If the data center goes down, then I don't have any data available. But in zone redundancy storage, your data is being asynchronously copied across three different data centers. And each and every data center gets how many copies? One copy. So let's say if my data, or if I am accessing all my data from, let's say, a data center called data center 1, which is my primary data center. And let's say if the entire data center is going down, so I ask Microsoft a very crucial question that, you know what, will my customers or will my clients be able to access the data from either zone 2 or zone 3? Microsoft says no, because we do not offer something called as read access. Your data is just backed up. Just in case if you want your data again, just in case, basically, if you want your data without any loss, then please go ahead, raise a support request with us. We'll help you give your data back again, just in case if the data center doesn't come up. But my business is not like that. See, my business is huge, and today's businesses are huge. And if I lose, let's say, 1 minute of business, I am losing, let's say, somewhere around billions of dollars. Let's imagine, for example, this is the model of operation of, let's say, an e-commerce giant like Amazon. And let's say today is, let's say, an Amazon Great Indian Sale. And imagine how many people would be visiting that particular website. And if even that website is down for a minute, imagine the amount of business loss. So the point is, I don't want to lose my customers. So what I say, you know what, Microsoft, I need also my clients, my customers to go ahead and read the data even from the secondary endpoint. Now, do you have any option like that? Microsoft says, yes, I have something called as read access geo redundant storage. I have something called as a read access geo redundant storage, which is a step higher than GRS, which is a step higher than the existing GRS. Meaning I can also go ahead and read my data from a secondary endpoint that is sitting in a location that is hundreds and hundreds of miles away. So can I read this data? How can I actually read this data? Now this is your endpoint, right? Now this is your URL. This entire thing is your URL that you're using basically to go ahead and access your data out here. Now if I do forward slash a hyphen here and say SECONDARY secondary and say enter. It says the site cannot be reached, the URL doesn't exist because my storage account is sitting in something called as a GRS and not an RAGRS. Can I switch my storage account to RAGRS? Of course I can. How can I again? Go to the configuration blade and just say switch this out from GRS to let's say RAGRS and go ahead and save this out. Once you save this out, it'll say it'll take like about 2 or 3 seconds and it'll say, you know what? It might take about 30 seconds for this to come into effect. Now let's see how it looks like. Same thing, RAGRS, it says primary and secondary are available. And if I go to something called as geo replication, it says, you know what? I am now syncing your data. I am now taking some time to sync your data because this is your first time that you're switching from GRS or from switching from a different replication tier to let's say RAGRS. So I'll take a bit of time and then sync your data and then make it available. So it takes about 20 minutes for this data to be available in the secondary endpoint. But do we wait for that time? No, I've already created something called, I already had a storage account. I think that was created by Akila. I just switched it to RAGRS like about 15 minutes. Guys, again, sorry to interrupt, but someone is on unmute. Can you please go ahead and mute yourself, please? Now, this particular storage account is on RAGRS mode, meaning I can go ahead and access my data even from, let's say, a different endpoint. Can I try it? Yes, let's see. So I have something like, you know, the blobs inside it, a container called develop, and I have a couple of blobs inside it. So let me go ahead and try to access this blob. And let me also see what is the access level. Now it is blob, which is a public access level, not a private. I'm going ahead and I'm saying, okay, fine, view, saying overview, take this out. Accessible, yes. Is it accessible also from the secondary endpoint? Let me also see that. I'll say it is even accessible from your secondary endpoint as well. It's even accessible from your secondary endpoint as well, meaning your storage account on the secondary endpoint is also live. How do I know it is live? If I come back into my storage account again, if I go into the geo replication out here, it would tell you that, you know what, prepare for a failover. This option would be enabled. And what is a failover again? Very simple. If I click on failover, it will take like about 1.5 hours in order to switch your entire infrastructure. Meaning now your primary endpoint after the failover is going to be West US and the secondary endpoint of the failover is going to be East US. Why is it that way? Very simple. If there is any natural disaster happening in, let's say, the entire East US, let's say, see, East US is this, right? So here they are, they frequently face tornadoes and all that stuff. So East US is a region that is like, always in the spotlight. So let's say if that particular region goes down, the entire region goes down, Microsoft will in beforehand tell you that it is having a service outage. Microsoft again will tell you it's having a service outage, according to which you can take a call. Like for example, how do you look at a service outage? Just type in Azure status It's called status.azure.com, and it'll tell you, you know what? These are the available services that I provide across, let's say, the globe, and I give you so many things out here which are available, and everything that you see in green is available. Everything that you see in green is available. And Microsoft Azure gives you this particular status every 2 minutes, and it'll tell you, you know what? If it's green, it is good. If it is red, it is critical. Meaning, please go ahead and let's say switch your region, or please go ahead and let's say help yourself out, because I am giving you a status in advance, and it's having a status for a lot of all the regions that are available. So you can switch between regions. For example, I am Asia Pacific, and I have to see, well, let's say, okay, fine, I am in Central India. My data center is in Central India, so I'll have to see, let's say, storage accounts, right? So there would be a service called Azure Compute and storage accounts, right? Storage accounts are healthy, which means I'm good. It's healthy in West India, it's healthy in Central India and South India as well. This is how I actually go ahead and check what is the status and all. And one thing to note, guys, before you make a switch to RAGRS, it's important to understand there is a pricing associated with it. Now, Microsoft is not only backing up your data on a secondary data center, Microsoft is also going ahead and replicating that data and making sure that it is available over the internet. So yes, there is definitely a pricing available. I mean, definitely a price tag that is attached to it. So just in case if someone asks you, you know what, it's a genuine question to ask, since you guys would be, serving in a DevOps engineering role. It's very genuine to ask that, you know what, can you tell me what is, let's say, the pricing that is associated with it? Like if I jump from, let's say, LRS to GRS, what is the pricing associated with it? Now, out of the mind, you may not have the answer, but what can help you is called as an Azure price calculator. Again, a very useful resource which will help you to calculate what are the services that are in your account and how much are you being charged for it. For example, let's say we are using storage accounts right now. So storage account is my service. I say I add it to the cart. I say, okay, fine. This is an East US. It's a blob storage. It's a standard general purpose V2. Access tier is hot, and LRS, which is like good enough. And it's telling me, you know what? The monthly cost for just the storage account is somewhere around 1573.47 rupees, which is okay, good enough. Now it can change according to the capacity that you are using. That will change according to the plan that you have, the support plan that you have. It will also tell you, you know what, for so many operations, I am charging you this much, 3 rupees per an operation. So for if you do, let's say, like about 1 lakh write operations, like you basically, do upload, let's say, 1 lakh blobs into it, it'll cost you somewhere around 36 rupees. If you, let's say, list, meaning if you see your containers, if you download everything, if you read something like that, each and everything has associated cost to it. And by, let's say, the end of the month, your estimated cost would be somewhere around 4,720 rupees. If you go at this speed, let's say if you're doing 10,000 retrievals, if you're doing something like this, if I do something less, right? If I just say only this much, the price will of course decrease. It's only 4 paisa. And let's say if I switch, let's say from LRS to RAGRS, what is the associated cost? Now, as in when I jump LRS on RAGRS, right? See, the amount of cost is increased from, let's say, 1573 to, let's say, 5,759 rupees. And also the associated costs out here. Now it's not reflecting here, but let me do that switch back again. Now take some time to reflect, but it's just addition out here. And this would be the amount of cost basically that you'll be associated with your account. So it's all about how much you are basically paying out there and what are you really doing out there. Guys, someone said that I'm not audible. Am I audible to everyone? Is anyone facing any issues? Could any one of y'all confirm, guys?
It's good.
You're good.
Great.
Yeah, you are audible.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So this is the price calculator what Microsoft Azure kind of offers you. And you can decide whether you want to go for a higher account or what is the purpose of the business that you're actually planning for. and what kind of an account that you actually do want, and then you can decide your services accordingly. Is that fine, guys? Any quick question that I can take here? Okay, guys, we were also discussing something like hot, cool, and archive tiers in the blob, right? So we said, you know what, you can switch from hot to, let's say, cool to, let's say, archive. We said we can do that. Meaning, why is the purpose again? What is the purpose again? It's the frequency of the data, or is the frequency at which you access the data. Now imagine I am again a banking organization. The same example what happened yesterday. Now I want my data for the first 6 months to be sitting in a hot access tier. As and when the 6 months plus 1 day happens, meaning as and when the 6 month time goes goes past, I want my data to be transferred into a cool tier and then later into an archive tier. Now, is it possible? Yes, it is possible. Now, how is it possible? Someone has to look at this one and say, okay, fine, you know what? This 18.8 is like already past 6 months date. Let me come here and move it to, let's say, a hot archive tier. Let's say change tier. I mean, a cool archive tier. Let's say change tier and then say cool and then say save. And this is okay, right? I mean, this is okay if I have, let's say, about 2 or 3 blobs out here. But this is a scenario that you'll barely find in, let's say, a live environment. In, let's say, a live environment, especially, let's say, if you're working for a banking organization, imagine the amount of data that is actually in here. Imagine, let's say, the amount of data that is actually in here, which is like tons and tons of data out here. Like you will have thousands and thousands of files out here. So is it humanly possible to go ahead and look at the date on each and every file and then decide whether it will sit in a hot tier or then it'll sit in a cool tier and etc.? Not sensible enough, right? Not really sensible. So again, I asked Microsoft that, you know what, I have an issue something like this. So I am I am a big organization. I am storing a lot of data and I want my data to automatically decide whether it will go into hot or whether it will go into cool or whether it should go into archive. Is there any way that I can maintain the life cycle of my blobs? Microsoft says yes. You yourself said the answer. You want to maintain the life cycle? Go for something called as life cycle management. Now, what life cycle management does is that it heavily cuts down on the manual load to change all your blobs from, let's say, from a hot archive to, I mean, from a hot access tier to a cool access tier and etc. How do you do that? Now, if I click on lifecycle management, it will say, you know what, add a rule. I'll say, okay, fine, let me try it out. I'll say add a rule, and now it'll ask me, okay, fine, what is the name of your rule? I'll say, okay, the rule name is something like hot access tier to cool tier 2 days. Meaning after 2 days, blobs older than, let's say, 2 days should go into, let's say, from hot to cool. So some meaningful name I'm giving out here. And I'll say, what is the rule scope? I want to apply this rule to all the blobs and all the containers that are sitting in my storage account. It says, okay, fine, great. Can you now go ahead and, I mean, it'll say, okay, fine, next. And it'll say, okay, fine. Now tell me, what do I do? I'll say, okay, fine. If the blobs were last modified, meaning if the blobs were last modified 2 days ago, because I am looking at data that is not touched since the last 2 days, please go ahead and do what? Don't delete it. Move it to, let's say, a cool tier or move it to, let's say, a cool storage. And I'll say, okay, fine, add. This will add a rule for me out here. This will basically go ahead and add a rule in here which will basically make sure to check the status of my blobs, to check the last modified date on my blobs. How does it check? This is how, guys. If I go here, and if I go into this particular develop container, it will say what is the last modified date. And if the last modified date is 2 days greater than today's date, so that's the calculation. So let's imagine today is like 20th. Of 2 days earlier than 20th, meaning the last modified date was somewhere around 17th. He'll say, okay, fine, I've identified one blob. Let me move it to cool automatically without even you touching it. If let's say there are tons and tons of blobs out there in your storage account, this rule is going to get applied to everything. You don't even have to even come here and sit I mean, you don't even have to come here and even touch this out. That is what lifecycle management actually gives you. But I have a scenario that, you know what, it's not all the blobs. It's not everything. It's just the blobs that are, let's say, starting with, or there's the blobs in this particular container starting with the letter G, or starting with, let's say, something called Geo. Okay, possible, right? Because you are naming your blob something like Geo and something like that. Something like Geo. Can I have something like it? Meaning, yes, you can. How can you? Again, lifecycle management. Again, lifecycle management policies. And you can go ahead and add a different rule out here. So can I support multiple rules out here? Yes. How many maximum rules that I can support? 100. It's per a storage account. You can go up to, let's say, 100 rules. So I'll say, okay, fine, add this out. And I'll say this is a container rule. And I'll say, don't apply it to everything. Only limit the blob, which I say. I'll say, okay, fine. Go ahead, click on next. I'll say, what is the value? I'll put the value same at 2 days. I'll say, if it's greater than modified than, more than 2 days, go ahead and move it to cool tier and say next. And now it will ask me, what is the blob filter? Meaning what kind of a filter that you want to apply. I'll say all the blobs in develop container that are starting with geo. That's it. If they are a different blob, let's say if there's a different blob, even that needs to be, that needs to come under this particular rule, which is starting with, let's say, ABC. I'll say ABC. This is called prefix match. And how many number of prefix matches that you can support for a rule? 10 prefix matches inside one rule. So effectively, it is like 1,000 rules that you can really apply on top of your storage account, considering you also have a prefix match inside it. You can go ahead and then add this out, and even this will go ahead and update things out. And once it's updated, you'll be able to see this particular rule as well. You can go ahead and modify that rule. You can go ahead and, let's say, enable or disable that rule and all that stuff. This is what lifecycle management policies actually enable you to do. Guys, any quick questions here that I can take? Anything? And one thing that I just missed to tell guys is that when you apply a rule, so I have applied a rule at 8:30 a.m. today. It will take 48 hours for this rule to be applied. It will take 48 hours for the rule to be first started. So you'll only see the effect after 48 hours. You won't see the effect immediately. Is that a limitation? Yes, but Azure is really working on that in order to get the time down. But as of now, that's how it works. And these are called lifecycle management policies. Guys, is this okay? Any quick questions that I can take really out here?
Yeah, one question. So today I just added the data from like a hot, and after the 2 days it will convert into cool, right? By applying these conditions.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So, according to the condition that you applied, whether you're telling it to delete the blob, then it will, so what happens is like if you're putting a rule called 2, right? 2 days. So assuming that your blob is like, hasn't been modified at all. So what happens? It will take about 2 days firstly to implement this rule. After the 2 days, it will then evaluate the time and then move your blob. So you will have to wait anywhere around 48 hours to 72 hours for the rule to actually see, for the blob to actually move. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes.
Great. Any further questions that I can take out here, guys? Okay. Moving forward, now we were looking at containers as a service that is offered by a storage account. Now, is there any other service that is offered by storage account? Yes, they are. As you see, there are file shares, there is queues and tables. Queues and tables barely used. File shares, yes, they are used. So what exactly is file share then? See, in not all scenarios that people would like to go ahead and use the containers. Why? N number of reasons. Because you'll have to transfer your data. So let's say if you have, let's say like 1 terabyte of data, it's a huge amount, right? So I was just doing, basically I was doing something called upload. I was just uploading it out. Useful, yes, for workloads that are not that huge. Let's say if you have a 1 terabyte data, then how do you transfer it? You'll again have different automations like AZ copy and PowerShell that you can basically use in order to make sure to copy your data. But it is time-taking process. Yes, it is certainly time-taking process because I am talking about, let's say, 1 terabyte data. So the thing is that I am a business whose needs are high, whose needs are huge. Meaning I have like terabytes of data or gigabytes of data that is being transferred between my storage account, the cloud, and the on-premises machine. So my laptop. I am not comfortable in using the container service that is offered by the storage account because it takes a bit of a bit long time. I mean, I know that it gives you like good amount of options like lifecycle management, like access tiers and all these things, but it's taking more time than I'm actually expecting. So is there any other service apart from this? Is there any other service, let's say, that Microsoft can help me out with? Yes, of course. There is a file share. Now, what exactly is a file share? Now, very simple. File share gives you the ability to convert your storage account or to convert a portion of your storage account into a hard drive on your computer. Like, for example, I on my computer as such have these 2 drives right now, or have these 3 drives right now, C, D, and E. When I go for a file share service, I can add my Azure storage account as an external hard drive or as an hard drive, as a virtual hard drive on my computer. Isn't that really great? Because it'll just be like a hard drive on my computer and I can just move files from my drive. It's as simple as it is. All I need to do is just go ahead into that particular drive, upload those files, and the job is done. So how can I add it? Like, what can I really do and what is the capacity of it? What are the limitations of it? Let's look at that as well. So coming back onto the Azure cloud again, firstly, you need to initiate a file share. And what is the maximum capacity of the file share? 5 terabyte. And what is the maximum capacity of a container, guys? 500 GB. That is the difference between, or that is the first limitation, or that is the first major difference between a file share and an Azure container service. So file share or Azure containers offers 100 times more storage capacity than a file share is. But I am okay with it. Like 5 terabyte is like good amount of data. It's not small amount of data. It's a very good amount of data because to fill up my 1 terabyte hard drive, it will take days. So for 5 terabyte for a business, it's definitely going to take like at least a couple of months. So I'm okay with that. So how do you create a file share then? Go ahead and say add a file share out here. As in when I add a file share out here, it'll say, okay, fine, what is the name of your file share? I'll say, okay, fine, my name of the file share is a demo file share. So giving a meaningful name out here. And even file share has tiers: hot, cool, and transaction optimized. Now, what are transaction optimized? What is this that is different from the storage account? I mean, that is different from the container service. Very simple. Hot, frequently accessed. Cool, not frequently accessed. Transaction optimized, depending upon the workload, the pricing will change. The pricing is actually decided by Azure depending upon the kind of workload that you do. So for my scenario, since it's like regular usage, I'll say okay fine, this is, let's say, a hot tier, and I'll say okay fine, this is all, let's say that is something that you get, and the maximum capacity is somewhere around 5 terabyte. I'll say okay fine, I'll create. As and when I hit and create, it'll say okay fine, you know what, you have a demo file share that has got created for you with a quota or with a capacity of 5 terabyte. But I am not that a huge business. I don't want 5 terabyte data at all. I want to, I am okay with 1 terabyte. Can I do it? Yes, I can. I'll say edit quota, and not 5120 but 1024. 1024 GB is nothing but what? 1 terabyte, right? So the quota is automatically changed to 1 terabyte. Now what it is telling that, you know what, okay fine, you have a file share right now. Can you go upload files directly inside it? Yes, I can. I can go ahead and, let's say, upload like I'm doing it in a Azure storage container. But file share again is not for that particular purpose. File share again is for a different purpose, so that you can connect the cloud to your on-premises machines. You can connect the entire cloud, let's say, to your storage account. I'm sorry, to your laptop. So I am saying, okay, fine, go ahead and connect it. It says, okay, I know you want to connect it, but which operating system are you on? I am right now supporting 3 different operating systems: Windows, Linux, and Macintosh. So if you are on any one of these, I'm okay with it. So for me, I am on a Windows operating system. I say, okay, fine, I'm on a Windows operating system. Now it will ask me firstly, how do you want to attach it? Like which drive letter that you want to give. As of now, I have what? C, D, and E. So I don't want to give any one of them. I want to give something that is different from C, D, E. So I can give something like X. I'll say the drive letter is X. Now tell me what you need to do. So it says, how do you want to authenticate it? I'll say, okay, fine, I'll use a storage account key that is okay with me. And now it says, okay, fine, you know what? This is a PowerShell script that I am giving you so that you can go ahead and run it on the computer that you want to connect it on. On the computer, you can go ahead and run this on. All you need to do is just run it and we are good. So how's it? So if I basically take this out and if I run it on my computer, which I am using right now, the script is going to fail. Now, why is it going to fail? Because the script, or meaning the cloud, the Azure file share, communicates with your computer over a port number called port 445. Now, what are ports and all these things? Like concepts of networking, not to go like too deep into it, but port is nothing but a communication channel between your laptop and, let's say, the cloud. And this port is called 445 out there. And for this communication to be established, you need port 445 to be open. But by default, your internet service provider will block this port. Please don't try to even open this port out, because your internet service provider blocks it for a reason. The reason being that people should not have an access to your machine out there. People should not basically uh, uh, you know make attacks on your machine and all that stuff for a number of reasons and etc. Then how do organizations take care of all these things? Now organizations do not connect these file shares directly upon the user's machine. Rather, they would have something called as a virtual machine. Now, what a virtual machine is, again, that's a huge concept that we're going to look at when we are looking at networking and etc. But as of now, just understand that it's the same operating system that I get, but it's just nothing but a machine on the cloud. It's just nothing but a machine on the cloud. I can just go ahead and create it as simple as it is with like a couple of clicks, and I can have a machine out there. Now, what I'm going to do is like I already have a virtual machine that is created for this particular class. So I am going to go into that particular machine. So how I'm doing this and all that stuff, we are again going to discuss about it. But today's class is about file share. So let's focus on that. So I have a virtual machine out here, and I am just taking this particular thing called an IP of this particular virtual machine, because this is, let's say, the address of that particular virtual machine, and I want to just connect to this virtual machine out here. So I'll say, okay, fine, put this IP here. Just a second. Come on. And go ahead and connect. And I've given it an ID and a password. So it'll ask me for an ID and a password out here. So fine, not a problem. So I've given it an ID and a password out here. I'll say yes. And now it'll go ahead and help me connect with this particular virtual machine out there. So it's again nothing but a Windows operating system that I've installed on top of this machine. So you would be seeing a Windows 10 operating system out here, just like the one that I have on my laptop. So just a second. Just like the one that I have on my particular laptop out here. So give it a second so that we can actually boot into this particular machine, and it'll take about 2 or 3 minutes for going into this machine out here. So guys, any questions that I can take within that time? Anything basically that I can take out here?
Should install anything or it will automatically open?
No, you don't have to install anything, and also tell you what you need to do at the end of the class. Just to just to help you all out with this particular demo. So it'll also tell you what you need to, what needs to be done, and etc. With that, you can also help yourself with this particular demo out here. Okay. So I am into this particular machine right now, and let me look at what are the drives here. So I have a C and a D, and I just have two dummy drives out here. So what I'll do right now is I'll say, okay, fine, I have my machine ready. Now I'll go into my Azure file share. I'll say, okay, fine, this is where my Azure file share was. And I'll go into that particular file share, and I'll click on that particular file share, and I'll say, okay, fine, now connect. I'll say, okay, fine, let me copy the entire script. Go into this particular machine. I'm just opening up a notepad out here. Just copy this. Now what you're going to do is open up something called as a PowerShell. I'll say PowerShell ISC is good. And it'll take a second to load. All I'll do is take this entire script here, copy this out, and paste it in, and I'll run the script. So this script will first test whether this connection is open. I'll say, okay, fine, connection is successful. I'll say now I have added a drive called Z with a letter called Z out there. If you look at this is now a new thing, right? This is now a network share out here. This is now the Azure file share that I just connected, and this is the connection between my local machine and the cloud. So if I go here, and if I say, okay, fine, new folder, and just say test folder out here, and give a file name out here like a dummy file, and just type something random, save this out, and as and when I do it, it will automatically, within seconds, it will get reflected on the cloud, the same file out here. Now imagine the amount of capability that this will help you to do. So someone who's sitting in a different part of the world can actually basically put this file in, and you sitting in a different part of the world can access this file. Can you delete this file from here? Yes, you can. Can you delete the file from the portal? Yes, you can. So it's a two-way bridge. You can go ahead, delete the files, you can upload the files and all that stuff. This is what an Azure file share actually gives you a capability to do. Now to test this out, you'll of course need a virtual machine, right? So all you need to do, guys, is very simple. Just come here, click on virtual machines out here, say create. I have already created one, so I'm just giving a demo on how to do it. So all you need to take care of, let's say, is like you can give any name of your virtual machine. Like the name could be anything. The resource group, you need to have a resource group in place, and you need to select Windows 10 Pro operating system. By default, it'll be a server. Don't go for a server. Go for a Windows 10 Pro. If it's a server, you can just click on the drop down, and at the end, it'll be Windows 10 Pro out here. So just select this particular operating system. Give a username, give a password, confirm the password. Make sure all these are allowed. Doesn't hurt. Click on I confirm and review and create. Just do that review and create out there, and in about 5 minutes or so, you will have a virtual machine that is created. Now, how do you log into this machine again? Every machine will have an IP address attached to it. So in my case, this is the public IP address out here. Just copy this public IP address, and in any Windows machine, if you do an RDP, you will have something called as like this particular connection out here, a remote desktop connection. Open this out, give the name of your machine, connect, and it'll ask you for a username and password. As and when you enter the username and password, you'll enter into this machine and you can start using it out. You can start using it out again. So how do you create it, and what are the technicalities of it? There is actually a lot involved in it, like a lot of basically a lot of theory that is involved behind the creation of a virtual machine, what are public IPs and all that stuff. But we will look at it when the time comes. But as of today, it is about file share, so let's focus on that. So guys, any questions that I can take, any quick questions that I can take with Azure file shares as such?
This file share can be accessed only on virtual machines or anywhere where the port 445 is opened.
So anywhere where the port 445 is open, but normally you in your local laptops, right? The port 445 is actually blocked. It is very rare cases where I have seen the port 445 to be open on your local machine. So in most of the cases, like let's say if you're working on the actual environment, in most of the cases these file shares would be attached to a virtual machine.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm using some other cloud like AWS or
Mhm.
Google Cloud. So
Mhm.
my virtual machine is on other different cloud apart
Yes.
from this Azure. So that
Mhm.
time how can I connect it?
Very simple. You don't have to do anything more. You have to do a simple thing. Like for example, we had the file share, right? So that's actually a very good question. Now the only thing that you need is this script and a PowerShell installed on the machine. This script is going to give you the key. This key doesn't differentiate between an AWS machine, doesn't differentiate between a GCP machine, or doesn't differentiate between a machine running on Azure. All it needs is a machine and an operating system installed on top of it. That's it. So your machine can be an on-premises, your machine can be on AWS or GCP. All it needs is an operating system, either being Windows, Linux, or Macintosh, and the port 445 to be open. That's it. Apart from that, you don't need anything. So the procedure is going to be just the same, like same what I've done out here. Does that answer your question, Chandra?
Yes. So another question, follow-up question. So
Mm-hmm.
if I have the different subscription in Azure and
Mm-hmm.
I have the VM, so
Mm-hmm.
there is a port, by default the port 445 is open to the different subscription on Azure.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't get you. Port 445 is open on a different subscription, like on the virtual machine you're talking about, is it?
Yeah.
No, it won't be open. I've like unblocked it myself. Like I opened it myself.
Okay.
Yeah. So you'll have to open it manually for a different subscription. Same subscription not required.
Okay, got it.
And the same file share can be used by multiple people, right? Or
Exactly. The same file share can be used by multiple people until and unless, for example, I have put this file share on top of a virtual machine. So if the resources have the access to this particular virtual machine, they can go ahead and use this particular file share. Nothing is stopping them from doing that. And if they don't have the access to this virtual machine and they're working on a different virtual machine, they can also go ahead and add this file share to that particular virtual machine by using this script.
okay,
So
and
one
is there
file
any
share,
way?
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, please
yeah,
go ahead.
please go ahead. No, please go ahead,
Is there
please.
any way we can restrict like read access kind of thing?
Not as of now. So if you are using a storage account key, right? So as we discussed yesterday, that's
Okay,
actually a huge difference between a key and a connection, sorry, a key and a shared access signature. So you are
okay,
giving a key out here. So as and when people, get this particular key, they will be able to go ahead and have a full control over it. But if you don't want to do that, let's say if you only want to have someone a read access, then the authentication method should be something like Azure Active Directory. It says
okay,
identity based access is not configured and all that stuff, but that's a different part again. So you need to have an Azure Active Directory, meaning you need to add people in Azure Active Directory, something like identity and access management out here. And you can go ahead and let's say add individual access to it. And you can now control whether it's a read, whether it's a write, whether what permissions they can have. So Active Directory authentication is one of the authentication that you can do out here if you do not want to go ahead and give a full access to it.
okay. Got it.
Does
Thank
that
you.
answer? Yeah.
Yes.
Guys, any further questions that I can take out here? Guys, anything? Also, very importantly, after you use the particular virtual machine, right? So you're going ahead and creating a virtual machine. After you use it, please go ahead, delete this virtual machine because it's going to incur unnecessary cost. Like how do you delete it? Just don't delete one particular virtual machine because a virtual machine has a lot of components associated with it. So I recommend doing it on a separate resource group and delete the entire resource group at once so that all the resources that are associated with that particular virtual machines are deleted. So as and when you are done, just go ahead and delete the entire thing out. Is that fine, guys?
Okay.
Yeah. Guys,
And in
any
file
further
share,
questions? Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah.
in file share, I saw that there is a snapshot and a backup. Two more options was there.
Mhm, mhm.
So, oh,
So not only in file share, you'll also have that option in even containers and etc. So it's like taking the backup of your entire cloud and I mean, if it's like taking the backup of your entire container and entire, file shares and etc. So we will cover that in a separate section. Like we have something called backup and restoring. So we'll cover that in separate section.
okay.
Guys, any further questions out here? Guys, I'm only hearing questions from Sanjay or Chandra. Does anyone have anything else? Like, are you all getting the concept? Like, is the class going too fast, too slow? Any general thing that I can take?
A little bit fast.
Okay, I'll adjust my pace accordingly. Guys, anything more that I can take out here?
Hi, this is Ramakrishna.
Yeah, Ramakrishna, go ahead.
In containers, can't we give the multiple files access to someone at a time?
So what happens is that in a container, you will not be able to control the container level access. Like you will not be able to go ahead and do a container level access as such. One option is that you can go ahead and generate a shared access token at the container so that the entire container is accessible. But multiple
So,
files is something that Azure doesn't support at this point. So single files, yes. If all the files, yes, but not,
But not
let's say
multiple.
1 or 2. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Guys, any more questions before we close the session today? We still have like 2 minutes, so if there are any more, I'm okay to take it, or otherwise we can call it a day.
Yeah, Kiran, you in starting I said there is problem. I mean, I'm having some problem with the container.
Yeah, that is looking very specific, because see, if I have the access level out here, the access level doesn't really change. It won't really go back to the private. So are you using a free tier Azure storage subscription, or are you using an organization subscription as such?
I'm using free tier only.
Okay, because generally it doesn't change that way. But I'll look into it. I'll see if there is any issue that is going around, and I'll get back to you on that. But as such, I have like put this on blob contain. I mean, I have put this on blob access tier, like in the starting of the session, even before the session actually, and it still stays there. So there isn't anything that really that we can do out there.
Yeah, I created another container
Mhm,
also, but that also the same thing is happening. Once I change it to private
mhm,
to I mean anonymous,
mhm,
then it's
mhm.
automatically changing to private automatically after few minutes, yeah, after few seconds.
No, not really. So there is something that is specific to that particular storage account. I'll see if there is any issue that is going around with that particular storage, or which location again that you have created the storage account in.
It's Central India.
Okay, fine. I'll see if there is any general outage, or if there's any bug basically that's going around in that particular region, and I'll get back to you on that. But as such, it'll remain until you change it.
Okay.
And in order to create a virtual machine, we need a resource group, or we just
Yeah,
create a resource
I
group.
would, yeah, you just create a sample resource group and go ahead and create the virtual machine in there. And as and when you're done, you can delete the entire resource group.
Okay.
Okay. So guys, the assignment for today is about the Azure file share, and is about the storage account in RAGRS. Switch your storage accounts to RAGRS. See how much time is it taking for the data to get replicated in the secondary region, and try connecting to your storage account, the secondary endpoint of your storage account, using Microsoft Storage Explorer. And also try out the Azure file share option. Tomorrow we're going to connect, and we're going to see something about Azure static website. That is going to be our topic for tomorrow. Is that okay, guys?
Yes.
Okay, then we are good to end this session today, and have a great day ahead.